The UFO phenomena is normally given little if any serious consideration by those engaged in credible scientific studies. So many UFO sightings can easily be dismissed as misidentified crafts, stars, planets, or just plain hoaxes. Alien abductions sound far-fetched, but in some cases even trace evidence has been left behind, baffling experts. So here are 4 cases of alien abductions. In Massachusetts, on the night of January the 25th, 1967, one of the most celebrated cases of UFO abduction began. Betty Andreasson was working in her kitchen. Shortly after 6:30, the lights in the house briefly blinked. Immediately after, a reddish light began to beam through the kitchen window. The sudden darkness in the house set the kids' nerves on edge. Her father ran into the kitchen to peer out the window and find the source of the unusual light. To his utter shock, he saw 5 odd-looking beings coming towards the house. Before he could regain his composure, he saw the beings walk right through the wooden door. What happened next would test the imagination of every open-minded person. The entire family was suddenly put into a state of paralysis, unable to move. One of the creatures went to Betty's father, while one of the other 4 began to make telepathic communications with Betty. One of them seemed to be a leader of the group. He was about 5 feet tall. The other 4 appeared to be about a foot shorter. All of the beings had a pear-shaped head, with wide eyes and small ears and noses. Their mouths were only slits and never moved, though they were able to communicate through their minds. The aliens wore a type of coverall, blue in colour with a wide belt. There was also a logo of a bird on their sleeves. Their hands only had 3 fingers, and they wore boots. The creatures did not move as a human, but floated as they went. Betty would later state that though she was frightened, she felt a sense of calm, even friendship towards the beings. The aliens were holding Betty's children in a frozen state of consciousness, but when Betty showed concern for them, the aliens released her 11-year-old daughter to assure her the children were not being harmed. Betty was taken by the aliens outside to a waiting craft, which rested on the side of a sloping backyard. The craft was about 20 feet in diameter, in the classic UFO shape. Betty believes that once she was aboard the UFO, it joined a mothership craft, where she underwent a physical examination and was also a subject to effects of strange equipment. After this, she was given a type of bizarre test which caused her pain at first, but resulted in a kind of religious experience. Approximately 4 hours later, she was returned home by 2 of the captors. When she arrived, her family was still in a paralysed state. One of the beings had stayed in the house, evidently to watch the other family members. After releasing the family from the trance-like state, the aliens left. Betty would later state that the aliens had hypnotised her to not recall any of the experience until a designated time. Betty had little or no knowledge of UFOs, and had been a devoted Christian. She believed that the abduction had a religious meaning. It would be later until she began to view the abduction as alien in nature. A few years on, Betty saw a psychiatric doctor. She was given 2 lie detector tests, a psychiatric review, and 14 sessions of regressive hypnosis. The results were startling. Betty, along with her daughter, relived a detailed account of a UFO experience, agreeing on all basic aspects. It would later be determined that Betty and her daughter were sane individuals who sincerely believed all of the details given in their statements. A long-haul trucker was in Michigan when he received a panic call from his wife at home. His wife was in a terrible state, believing that she may have been drugged. After immediately driving home, he took his wife to the emergency room, where they found no signs of drugs. There was a strange burn found on her right shoulder, but little else. He'd brought his wife home under the impression that she'd had a bad dream. The next day he went into the garden and discovered 4 bizarre burn marks in the grass, in a circular formation. He also noticed that a nearby tree had leaves 20 feet up that were burnt black. In the weeks to come, he took his wife for hypnotic regression therapy, whereupon she recalled being taken into a spaceship in which they performed increasingly intrusive acts on her. She became paranoid and terrified, and one day the husband come home to find that his wife had unfortunately ended her own life. Desperate for answers, he sent samples of the burnt grass to a local college, who told him that they were radiation burns. However, the college suddenly changed their mind and claimed that they weren't radiation burns, almost as if, in the husband's words, they were told to say that. On December the 3rd, 1967, Herbert Schirmer, a 22-year-old patrolman, was making his usual rounds. He checked the Ashland sales barn and several gas stations along Highway 6. He just passed through the intersection of Highway 6 and 63 at around 2 a.m. He drove the short distance down 63 and stopped with his headlights shining on the object. According to Schirmer, the object was definitely not a truck. The red lights he'd seen were blinking through the oval portholes of a metallic oval-shaped object that was hovering 8 feet above the road surface. The object appeared to have a polished aluminium surface. It had a structure underneath, like a landing gear. As he watched, the object rose into the air with flames coming from underneath. It passed almost directly over Schirmer's patrol car, then quickly shot out of sight. Schirmer returned to the police station, noting that it was now 3 AM. This surprised him because he felt only 10 minutes had passed. At the station, he made this entry into his logbook. Saw a flying saucer at the junction of Highway 6 and 63, believe it or not. After this encounter, he developed a red rash on his neck, and he began to feel ill. Word of the sighting reached the University of Colorado, which investigated UFO reports. Schirmer was asked to come to Boulder, Colorado, and on February the 13th, 1968, he was hypnotized at the University of Wyoming. Under hypnosis, he recalled that after he stopped his car near the object, the engine died and his radio went silent. A white object emerged from the craft and seemed to communicate mentally with him, preventing him from drawing his gun as he wanted to do. After the hypnotic session had ended, he was able to recall even more details about the encounter. The beings were friendly, they drew energy from electrical power lines, and they had a base on Venus. Returning to Ashland, Schirmer was appointed Ashland's police chief. However, he resigned after 2 months, unable to concentrate on the job due to his UFO experience. According to Schirmer, he was ridiculed by some of the townspeople, his car was dynamited and his wife left him. Further regression hypnosis sessions were conducted on June 8, 1968, and the results of those sessions were reported in 2 books. One odd fact that was brought out during the session was that the aliens wore uniforms with a winged serpent on the left breast, similar to the winged serpents that have appeared in mythology around the world. The following abduction happened in Brazil on May 4, 1969. 24-year-old José Antonio de Silva, an enlisted soldier, was fishing on a lagoon when he suddenly heard voices, became aware of figures moving behind him, and felt a burst of light strike his leg. He dropped his fishing rod and fell to his knees. 2 beings about 4 feet tall, wearing aluminium-like suits and what appeared to be helmets, seized him and dragged him to an object sitting on a dirt road. The object was shaped like a cylinder. The soldier was taken inside, where the beings put one of their helmets on him. De Silva felt the craft rise. The beings talked among themselves in a language he did not recognise. After a long period of travel, he felt a jarring that suggested their craft had landed. The soldier was then blindfolded and led to a large room, where they removed the wrap from his eyes. A being stood in front of him who was extremely hairy and slightly taller than the rest. When the others took off their helmets, they were of similar appearance. De Silva watched as the beings examined his fishing equipment. Later, the witness noticed on a low shelf the bodies of 4 human men and became terribly frightened. Later, the beings gave him a dark green liquid to drink out of a stone glass. The leader then began a strange conversation with the soldier, mostly about weapons, which was conducted entirely with gestures and drawings. Shortly afterwards, De Silva was blindfolded again and taken back to Earth. As the craft landed, he felt like he was being dragged and lost consciousness. He woke up alone near the town of Victoria, about 200 miles from where he had been fishing. He was dehydrated and hungry. Only his identity card, which the aliens had examined, had disappeared. He had a swollen knee where the ray had struck him, and 3 open wounds on his neck, where the helmet had rubbed against his skin. He had been away for 4.5 days. So that's 4 stories of alien abductions. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.